What is up, everybody? I'm Dr. Ray Gorman, physical therapist, owner of Engage Movement, and I am joined here today with Dr. Chris Beavers, owner of Be Ready Physical Therapy out in Nashville, correct? Just outside of
That's
Nashville.
Nashville. That's right.
Cash-based physical therapy clinic, and also the owner of Virtual Refresh, helping cash-based clinics and maybe even more than cash-based clinics kind of get their front desk in order and placing some virtual and potentially even in-person admins. Is that kind of a good
Yeah.
summary of what
Yeah.
virtual refresh is?
Yeah. There's a lot in there for sure, but that definitely gets a good summary of it.
Awesome, man. Well, Chris, happy to have this conversation with you. Why don't we just start with like a little background, give a little intro about yourself, what kind of led you here, and let's start there.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, we've got a unique story. I graduated PT school in 2018. Kind of got 6 months into working for the big corporate mill, like most people did, and just
Classic.
didn't love it. Like it was like, man, I'm 6 months in, and I could sense the restlessness kind of starting to happen. And man, found a lot of like this is kind of like the information age of cash PT, and started just consuming a bunch of that stuff. And literally a year to the date, I quit my full-time job. I had no kids at the house at that point, and so it was like this is a perfect time to quit, start a practice. And we started our practice in fall of 2019, which is cool. So almost a year to the date, I quit and
Nice.
jumped headfirst into the practice. And man, just went all in on this cash-based performance PT model, and had a blast doing it. Except COVID hit at the start of 2020, and we found out we were expecting our first kid, so life was crazy scary at that point. But we survived and made it to the other side, and now we've been at it for, gosh, 5 years. We just celebrated our 5 year
It's
anniversary, and
awesome,
we've
man. Congrats.
yeah,
That's huge.
thanks, man. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
huge milestone, and we've got a good solid team with us at this point. We've got three other providers and a front desk as well, and so that's kind of how the practice side of things has gone. And then virtual refresh was born literally almost on complete accident because my wife started helping me with some admin stuff. We were about a year and some change in, kind of getting busy, time poor. I wasn't the most organized type, and my wife, coming from a teacher background, was like,
Yeah.
well, I can help design some back end stuff and make things just look a little cleaner and a little more put together. And I knew a bunch of other people in the cash space with some business groups and things that I was in, and she literally started getting asked by other clinic owners, "Hey, can I have some admin help?" And eventually, it was
Yeah.
like, I just want to kind of outgrow her desire to teach and get into this maybe full time. And eventually that happened, and it was like, well, shoot, now we've outgrown you, and we like, what are we going to do at this point? Like, we either just like cap it, or like, I think there's a pretty cool opportunity here. So we hired our first admin in 2021, and trained her on some processes. Thankfully, she was local. We didn't ever meet in person, but we knew her. She was
Yeah.
one of my good buddies from PT school. It was actually his sister, and she also was a physical therapist, and was like, man, this is kind of a cool thing, right? Like, we've got these people who have this background. She had kids at home but was burnt out, didn't want to go back to the clinic, and it was like, man,
Yeah.
we have this cool mix of people who want to use their degree and still be plugged into the PT world, and this need for practice owners who are very time poor and not sure where to go to help with that. And so then that's kind of how we started with what we're doing now, which is helping a ton of other practice owners, either by training their current existing front desk team, how do you optimize that, especially the phone conversation piece, or hey, we've got a team of US based virtual admins who we've already trained. They know how to have phone conversations with people. They know the systems of kind of typical cash based and hybrid practices. And hey, how do we plug them into your business and help you just free up your time? And so that's kind of where we've been, and it's been wild.
You it's always cool when like businesses evolve like that by just solving a problem for yourself and then saying, "Hey, we did actually a really good job of this. Like how do we replicate it?" Which is a great exercise for anybody watching where you're like, "How do I replicate this for me first?" And then you can kind of scale beyond that. One of the things that you said that I thought was pretty cool, and I think that this is kind of a unique offering by you guys, is a lot of, if not most, from my understanding, of the virtual admins that you're training, or the admins in general that you're training, they actually have credentialing, degrees, experience in the space. Is that true?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, everybody, I'd say the vast majority, PTA, OTA. I've even got,
Okay.
some PTs that jump in. I've got some
Yeah.
speech language pathologists, massage therapists, folks who had that kind of clinical itch and degree.
Well, and the interesting thing, as I've kind of evolved, outside of the clinical world, is it's been insane what the flexibility of the internet has done for earning
Yeah,
potential. And so I think what ends up happening is people think like, oh, like, why would you leave the physical therapy world and go work remotely as an admin? Because the reality is, like, if you're in outpatient orthopedics, for example, you might actually be out earned by the admin position if you're also doing some sort of sales role, if you have some sort of structure that is commission based, and if you are, really good at that sales process, as that conversation navigation process. So, for anybody out here listening that's like, hey, maybe I'm thinking of doing something different outside of PT, want more flexibility, like, there's also an avenue to connect with
absolutely.
Chris, um, over there. What were you kind of seeing for yourself personally that, made you say like, hey, like, to your wife, what would it look like for you to come in and maybe start working for Be Ready PT? Like, what did that initial conversation kind of look like for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think she kind of just like started seeing the writing on the wall where it was like, hey, Chris was just excited to get out of his full time job and be busy enough to replace his income. And like, we kind of just hope this thing works, right? Which I think is
Sure.
where most like practice owners start. But then it got to a point where it's like, dude, I'm seeing patients, I'm taking phone calls on my way home from the office. I'm like up early doing this random stuff that I just like quite frankly couldn't stand. It's like I don't want to create a graphic on Canva. Like this
Sure.
drives me mad. And so it was like, hey, Chris is kind of reaching this point where he's doing things he just doesn't love, and it's sucking the life out of me. It's like bookkeeping and all this other random stuff they don't tell you
Yeah.
about when you start a business. And now this stuff is getting compiled on top of treating patients. And instead of me treating patients, which is what I was loving to do and continue to grow the business, all the growing the business stuff starts getting put on the back burner. And now all of the, hey, I have to do it because it's in front of me and I have a deadline, which doesn't ultimately push my business forward, is now in the
Mm-hmm.
way of me growing and pushing the business forward. And so she's like, "Well, let me like I can take some of that stuff off your plate." And then it became like, shoot, like I've got leads just kind of strolled all over the place. Like they're in my personal phone, but also the business line and in my email. And she's like, "Well, how do you even know like where these people are in the process?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just remember." And
Yeah.
I'm certain that I've lost a bunch of money that way because there's people like I can't.
Yes.
I'm
You can
incapable of
only remember
remembering it
so
all.
much. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
only remember
dude.
so much.
And so it's like this stuff has strolled everywhere, and I've got a pretty good memory, but it's not that good. And as you get busier now, not only can I not push the business forward, but the revenue generating stuff, like a patient would fall off, and I would just be like, "Well, that's okay. I'm busy enough." Like I'd almost be happy with it,
Yeah.
versus like I did a disservice to that patient because they needed to be on the schedule to get what they wanted or the outcome
Yeah.
that they're after, and
And
so
you
everybody
just didn't
suffered.
have the energy, attention, resource to go chase that because there's opportunities in front of you. It's funny. There's two things that I think I want to coattail on there. Um, One is, you don't realize how many people are falling off your process until you actually have processes in place that
So
capture
true.
them.
So true.
I remember one day, we had just recently, over the course of this year, we've installed some robust systems, for engage movement in our back end. And one of my follow up sequences was just kind of going off in the background. And this person was like, hey, I'm so glad that you reached out. I'm sorry I haven't responded. Like, things have been so crazy. And I was like, holy crap. Like, to me, that was just like this light bulb moment in my head. And I think about our clients who are
Yeah.
going through the same thing. And the second part of that is like, the easy part about cash PT is doing the physical therapy. Like, that's the easy part of it.
100%.
What I found when I had worked myself into the cash PT role was that like I had a lot of the same problems just on a smaller scale, right? Like I was still getting crushed with time. Now I was getting crushed with these back end things. Yeah, it wasn't as much like documentation, but it was now all the back end stuff. So it's just very
The
interesting.
same
Like
vein.
I think a lot of the people out there are going to relate to like that growth, that process. Do you guys have like a delegation matrix? Do you have something that is like what are kind of these indicators that you generally like to see where, you know, somebody would know like, okay, it's time for me to bring on an admin because I feel like in business there's always this catch 22 of like, am I busy enough to
Yep.
justify this versus if I don't implement this, can I actually get busy enough? I feel like people hit that catch 22. What do you guys generally kind of see as like a rule of thumb there?
Yeah, there's a couple different things. I think, some of the, I always like to take an objective approach to anything, right? So I think there's some
Hmm.
objective measures to hit here before I like to work with somebody, but there's also some subjective things too, right? I'll start with the objective because I think they're a little bit more like cut and dry.
Yeah.
I need to see some level of consistent revenue from a practice. That varies a little bit from region to region, maybe somebody's goal. Rough estimate, usually in that 10K a month range on a recurring basis. I like to at least
Hmm.
see somebody hit that, and maybe they've hit it at least twice, right?
Sure.
That's a big, hey, you've demonstrated you're busy enough, your sales skills are decent, you can at least acquire customers, you kind of have a proof of concept of your business, right? Because you wouldn't
Yeah.
want to bring somebody on just because you're like, I think it's time, and then now they're taking your phone calls or they're doing some other things, and you can't keep them full with things, right? So that's one big like objective measure that I like to see. The other like objective thing that I'll sometimes look at with practice owners as I'm talking with them is, hey, what is the like trajectory of revenue looked like over at maybe even a 6 month window? Because that's a good leading indicator at that point. We've got holidays that are, have gone and come, and we've just seen what the flow of that looks like. And what I'll oftentimes find with a business owner who needs to hire somebody is we've got this yo yo effect going on,
Mm,
right? Where, hey, I hit a record month, 10, 12K. I dropped a little bit the following month because maybe I was fulfilling, call it 8 to 10K. And then, oh crap, the bottom fell out the next month and I only did 6K. And most practice owners will freak out and they're like, "Oh, I can't afford to hire somebody." But really, you're
yeah.
getting in your own way because you were too busy. Stuff started falling through the cracks. You weren't marketing, and then now you got back out and hustled,
Yep.
and now you're busy again the following month. And so you have repeatable processes to do it. You just got to consistently do it.
Yeah. It's funny. We solve a similar problem in a different way, right?
Yeah,
we
exactly.
we call
Exactly.
it we call it the revenue roller coaster. And it's okay, well, I always say to them, like, I want you to think of why this is happening, right? You're out there, you're pounding the pavement, you're doing all this marketing, you're doing all the sales, and then all of a sudden your schedule's full. And so you generate all this cash. Now you have to fulfill on all the packages that you just sold, all the revenue that you just generated. And now what's going to happen is you're going to hit these cliffs where you're not going to have steady leads coming in because you're only one person. You're not going to be able to go out and drop into as many facilities, shake hands, kiss babies, do that kind of stuff. So, like, what we do is we implement a recurring revenue structure that at least raises the floor. And the important thing for people to know here is like, I want y'all to know that like there's multiple ways to skin the cat, right? There's multiple ways to solve the problems in your business. It's like, do you want to bring on somebody for delegation processes? Do you want to bring on something for, you know, recurring revenue? In my opinion, there becomes a time and a place where you absolutely need to do both, because if I can generate enough recurring revenue in my business to pay for my base of my support
Exactly.
staff, my team, like my stress level just absolutely goes away. Absolutely
Facts.
goes away. So for anybody out there where it's like, am I on the fence of this stuff? I always say like do an exercise of like what are the things that you do that one you don't like doing, and two, what are the things that don't make you money specifically, right? Like those are
Um,
really good places to start crafting a role for these for an admin for somebody to come in that will be a little lower risk rather than you bringing on another therapist, for example.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think you're spot on. That's like the big subjective stuff that I like to look at,
yeah,
the objective measures, but also the subjective stuff. Like what is absolutely just like crushing you from a time standpoint and just like the stuff you hate doing, right? And can you offload that for a fairly affordable price and now actually move into higher leverage task, which is marketing, which is building continuity systems for the business. Like all
yeah.
of those things are much higher leverage than you texting a patient to reschedule them, right? It's like, dude, you can offload that pretty affordably.
And you can very easily calculate the ROI where it's like, hey, if we just got, four clients back on the schedule per month, maybe like four visits, like your bottom line would be protected there. I think that's a huge factor as well. It's like one of the things that I think you generally see, and I think you adapt to it, is this concept of like risk in business.
Yeah,
And I think when you are bringing somebody on, like it's scary, right? Because not only is it risky financially for you, but like it's risky because like now you're responsible for somebody else. Part of leaning into this entrepreneurial journey though is understanding that that is a necessary part of this, and no business like grows and evolves and expands from just continuing to play it safe. That's actually why a lot of people kind of get stuck, get burnt out, I
right.
think, like you were saying. um what would you say is like the what are some of like the top things that generally people are kind of experiencing, struggling with? You identify these problems in their business when they reach out to contact you, or, I don't know if you guys ever audit their business. When you audit their business, what are some of kind of like the top things that, you generally see in that process?
Yeah, I think big top thing we've already talked about, which is that roller coaster of revenue. That's the big one, right? We've
Yeah.
already talked about that point. The other big thing I look at is like schedule utilization, right? Like over the course of months. Again, are we physically seeing a drop in patients? And how does that correlate to the amount of leads that they have coming in? Because if
Mm-hmm.
the lead flow hasn't changed, but my schedule utilization is changing, meaning it's decreasing, I don't have as many
Mm-hmm.
visits on the schedule. Hey, now I have a front end issue, right? And then we try to diagnose why that's happening. Is it, hey, I don't have time to get to people in a timely manner and they've already potentially called another clinic, right? So
Yeah.
that's one potential constraint of that. Speed to lead is still a thing, right? Even I think a lot of these practice owners that build a really good organic local word of mouth following, these people will tend to wait a little bit longer than the average bear. But if you've got 50 solid 5-star Google reviews, you're going to get the occasional person that just Googles you. And if you don't pick up they
Yeah.
call you at 8 a.m. on Monday and you can't get back to them until 4 p.m. on that Monday, they've probably called somebody else at that point. And now
Yeah.
that's lost leads that are, people just they're reaching out, they're asking for help, and we can't get to them or service them in a timely manner.
And I also think generally when we're doing something atypical in a process, which, cash PT is atypical to the general healthcare experience, like people want to talk to somebody.
Yep.
So we generally have clients that do kind of one of two things. They maybe have a link up there to have clients just pop right onto their schedule, or we have something that allows them to either contact the clinic, book a call so that we're not playing phone tag. But I think it's really important to understand that, like, you want some sort of screening process, you want some sort of qualification process, you want to be able to set these expectations before you have that initial interaction with your client. Because, one, like, the important thing when they show up to that evaluation is they need to know, like, and trust you, and they also need to believe that you can help. And so having some conversation, having some nurturing process before they even show up is just a huge benefit to the business. Um, the other thing that you said that I think is really important, and why I think people struggle to grasp, like, when do I bring somebody up, is like they don't know their numbers in their business. They
No,
don't know how many people are contacting them. They don't know what their schedule utilization rate is. They maybe don't even have like a boundary on what their ideal capacity is, right?
so true. So true.
And I think for some people it's like they struggle with this, like, well, how do I create it? And it's like, honestly, like, you make it up. Like,
Yeah.
do you want
You
to
build the ship as
see,
it's flying.
yeah, do you want to see 27 clients a week total? When you see 30, do you notice that like you start to resent your work week a little bit? Okay, cool. Then you have an upper limit. Now, does that mean that you're never going to see 30 clients in a week when you
Sure.
get really busy and you got to grind? But I mean, it's starting to put some parameters on this that very basic stuff. How many people are contacting you? How busy do you want your schedule to be? And how many sessions are you actually seeing in a week? Sounds like a really good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think those are all spot on. And like, what's your energy to call these people? You talk about building no like and trust. Like,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how, like, my energy level at 5 p.m. after having seen 5 patients to try to talk to a new lead. After I
Yeah.
was in business for like a year, you're just like, wow, I'm kind of tired of putting a face on. Like, do you want help or not? And then you're just kind of chalk it up. Well, they weren't a good fit. And it's like, no, dude, like, you just weren't having a good, solid conversation to build value, you know?
I used to tell myself if they really want to work with me, they'll wait. Like, that's just what I would tell myself, right? And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people do that. But as a consumer, also now, like, being that, I feel like I'm a real adult at this point. The last thing that I want to do as a consumer is get on the phone at 7 p.m. at night because that's when you're available. Like,
Yeah.
I understand that there may be some time and place where you have to do that, but you've also got to kind of put yourself in the consumer shoes of like, how do you get to this person? How do we kind of stop playing phone tag? Um,
Absolutely.
Chris, anything that you kind of want to leave them with, anything that we didn't cover that you feel like is like, hey, I want to make sure people know this one thing about virtual refresh, or about this one thing that'll really make a change in their business.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways I had when I was in that stage of just being time poor and like not sure where to go or not sure what the next steps were, it's like, hey, take a step out of the business, start asking yourself, questions, kind of like much like what we talked about.
Hmm.
you know get some wise counsel. Maybe you got a business coach or somebody you can
Yeah.
lean into,
Yeah.
spouse even, right? And start having conversations about what's wearing you thin, and what do you want your next 6 months to look like. Because I think so often you get analysis paralysis, and you just don't know where to go, you don't know what to do, and so you just kind of stay stuck, and like, that's a not a fun place to be. And
Yeah.
so step back before you get too tired, and then figure out, what is the next right step. Do I need to hire somebody? Do I need to take patients off my plate and take a temporary pay cut and be okay with that?
Yeah.
Is it me hiring another provider? Is it me hiring an admin? Whatever it is, you have to plan and think about what the next step is, and start taking itty bitty steps towards getting that. And if it is hiring an admin, even if you're not organized, like, I can't tell you how many practices I've stepped into and they're crazy unorganized because they were solo provider. But
Yeah.
again, you take the next right baby step, because sometimes that painful step will ultimately free you up on the back end. It's just going to be a little painful in the short term.
Well, and if you're able to provide an admin that has some structure in place, they can almost come in as one of their projects being, hey, we just need to get the business in order, the flow in order. Like, that's a really beneficial thing. I also would just want to point out, are you insinuating that physical therapists, for whatever reason, are over analyzers?
Yeah, dude, that's like all we do for a living.
Yes, and I see that all the time. And the piece of advice that I want to say there is like, for a second, you have to separate your PT brain clinical reasoning skills and your business clinical reasoning skills. The PT side, we want to overanalyze everything. We want to account for all these variables we want to like do no harm, right? So like we are so biased towards safety in that experience. And
Mm,
that's an important thing to filter when you're working with patients. When you go on to the business side though, you almost need to be ready to experience failure. You almost need to be ready to take some risks that maybe seem quote unquote dangerous. So it is one of the skills that I think PTs need to master when they go into business, when they go into entrepreneurship, is how do I balance the way that I think clinically and how do I balance the way that I think, as an entrepreneur? I think you've got to kind of look through a different filtering lens, um, if you
100%.
are going to grow and scale the business and really make it something that's sustainable. So,
Super hard to do. It's like so hard, right? That
yes,
safety
I had
brain
to do
is
it
so
myself.
dominant.
I had to do it myself. I used to be that exact person, so I totally get it. Chris, where is the best place for people to reach you, people to find you, people to learn more about what Virtual Refresh is doing?
Yeah, for sure. Several different places. Easy. Give us a follow on social media. I post a ton of free content on there, constantly giving away all the information we know about
Yeah,
sales and all that good stuff, and potentially hiring pitfalls and those kind of things. You can find us on Instagram, instagram.com/virtual refresh. Or if you just have a personal question for me, feel free to email me, chris@virtualrefreshco.com.
awesome.
So
And we'll make sure that information is in the notes here on wherever we post this to.
cool.
Chris, good conversation. I think a lot of people need what you are offering, are nervous to do it. I'd say look, just have a conversation, explore kind of the potential, explore maybe the avenue of like what you'd have to do to be net positive on this, what you would get back on your schedule, on your time, on your tasks. That is going to be the stuff that is really going to be valuable. And I'm looking forward to seeing what your company and my company ultimately can put together for the industry as we come in and try to help people kind of really like redesign what they want their career and what they want their life to be like. So
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate the time and connecting as always.
thank you, Chris. And we'll be sure to send this out to all you guys. Once again, please follow Chris on Instagram at Virtual Refresh. If you're not following me, at Ray Gorman DPT, we'd be happy to connect you and we'll chat with y'all later.